All right, welcome to another episode of the Press Box Podcast, a day after the Super Bowl episode. We'll be recording this on Monday. We just had Super Bowl 52 yesterday. Definitely a good game. Whether you're happy with who won or who lost, one thing we can say for sure is it lived up to the hype in terms of game. So we'll break that down, talk a little bit about how the NFL season ended, the season as a whole, maybe look at next year briefly, and not sure what else we'll get into, but come along in the ride with us, and get into it here in a second after we talk a brief moment about our sponsor, of course, Bonus Room Art. If you haven't already, head to bonusroomart.com today to pick up some great art prints, and check out the new media tab. Just announced on Instagram. To see some more cool stuff in Bonus Room Art, so go there, and also remember us on Twitter as well, at PressBoxPod. We had a poll question up a little over a week ago about the Pro Bowl, so looking to interact a little more with you guys on social media, so be sure to follow us there as well, and get all the latest news from the Press Box Podcast. But with that being said, let's get into today's episode.
Okay, so welcome to the Press Box Podcast. The day after Super Bowl 52, held in the Minnesota Vikings home stadium in Minneapolis, Minnesota. U.S. Bank Field, I believe, is the correct name.
That's right.
And the Vikings were one game away from playing the Super Bowl in their home stadium, but they did not. And the Patriots took on the Eagles, and I would say it was the game went totally against what I thought it was going to be. How about you?
I would totally agree with that. Because we during the season we kind of do our picks competition, and we text the lines early in the morning and Sunday morning, and the Patriots were favored by around 4.5, depending on what you looked at, and I thought that was like just a steal. If you were going to bet on the game, I thought the Patriots were certainly going to win by at least 10 points, which is what I think we talked about last time. But yeah, definitely very surprised at the outcome.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about this though is the Patriots. Gosh, I really don't really know where to start. I mean, if you look at this at the Patriots during this postseason, okay, the Titans obviously were no match for the Patriots.
Yeah, they're not in their class, not in your class, Christina.
Yeah, they're not in their class, Christina. That's right. Now the Jaguars had them beat. I mean, the Jaguars had them beat, and they got conservative. The Jaguars, and part of that is because they were playing in Foxborough. Part of it is they had Blake Bortles as their quarterback. We can go into all that. We went into all that
Right.
in our pregame or our episode leading up to Super Bowl. But then the Eagles pretty much dominated. Now the Eagles couldn't stop the Patriots, but they pretty much dominated their defense. So maybe the Patriots were not as good as everybody was willing to say that they were. They play in a weak division. They play in a weak conference. So, maybe they just weren't as good as everybody thought they were.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the Jacksonville game, but even before that, the last, I guess, team in their class, if you want to call it, they played was Pittsburgh, and they barely beat them on that weird touchdown call. So,
right.
I think there's something to be said for what you were talking about there, in terms of maybe they're not as good as we thought, but and you mentioned this too, that their defense was just subpar yesterday. I mean, all the Super Bowls that the Patriots won, especially the early ones, you look back and they had a pretty notable defense.
Right.
This game yesterday, I mean, their best player on defense was James Harrison, the guy they just signed off the waiver wire, is almost 40 years old, and the guy played. I didn't count snaps, but it seemed like he was on the field all the time. And
yes,
that combined with the fact that they didn't play Malcolm Butler at all. What did you think of that? That was kind of weird, I thought.
Yeah, that was very weird. And I'm gonna, before I get into Malcolm Butler, I want to pyramid off what you just said.
Yeah.
You brought up something. You texted me earlier today, which I thought was a really marvelous point. Was that if the Seahawks run the ball instead of throwing it 2 years ago in the Super Bowl or
Right.
3 years ago in the Super Bowl, if the Falcons don't run out of gas and don't get conservative, the Patriots have lost 5 Super Bowls in a row. All right.
Exactly.
And that's interesting when you think about that. But you brought up their first 3 Super Bowls they won early on in the 2001,
Right.
2003, 2004. that's the way you play football. That team was built on a solid defense and a running game. Tom Brady was not the Tom Brady then that he is now. And I think you can see today that you can have the greatest quarterback in the world and you can throw that football all over the field. But if you can't stop anybody and you get into a shootout, all it takes is one turnover. And we saw that last night.
Yeah.
And you can lose a football game.
Yeah. Brady had over 500 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. I mean,
Exactly.
They weren't relying on him to do that in their early success as a team,
Right, exactly. And last night he had to do it to just to keep pace with what the Eagles were doing. And that was, you cannot win. And it sounds kind of stupid to say this given the Patriots' success, but you can't win consistently, without a little bit of luck, playing football that way. I mean, you got to be able to stop people, and the Patriots couldn't stop anybody. But going into the Malcolm Butler thing, that was they've been talking about that all day today, the talking heads, and nobody can really figure out what it was. I think the last thing I heard was supposedly he was not on the Patriots flight. He missed the Patriots flight from Boston to Minneapolis. But then again, he practiced all week. He was sick, but he practiced all week. And then all of a sudden it looked like from his emotional reaction during the national anthem, that Belichick told him it like right before the game.
Right.
That he wasn't going to play.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
Which to me makes absolutely no sense at all. Now, if you're going to sit the guy for disciplinary reasons or whatever, that's fine. But considering how the Eagles torched his replacement in the first half, you would think that they would have put him in the second half.
Right. I think that, and look, we don't know everything that went into that decision, and it may or may not come out. But if it is along those lines of what you mentioned, I think that's probably Belichick just being Belichick and thinking, we don't need this guy. Like, I'll show him. We can win without him. But when the corners they have playing are, not saying Malcolm Butler's like the reincarnation of Champ Bailey in his prime or anything, but the corners they had out there are not as good as Malcolm Butler. I mean, he's an above average NFL corner. So I think that. I think this isn't college or high school or discipline is part of your program. It's the Super Bowl and you're professionals. You should play the best players in this situation. So if it had anything to do with discipline or things like that, then I'd have to disagree with that for sure.
Well, and going off what you just said, somebody brought up the point today, which I agree with totally. If the guy would have beat his wife or been caught in a drug-induced coma, that's a different story.
Right.
Okay, totally different story.
Right.
But if the guy missed a plane flight or missed a meeting, come on. Like you said, it's the Super Bowl, all right? You can sit him out for a series or you can sit him out for a couple series, but you put him in that game if he's the best player, one of the best players you got.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Right. Absolutely.
So, and again, I think, another thing that leads me to believe is if you look at the Patriots, I think when Belichick leaves the Patriots or when Brady's retires, that organization is going to fall apart. I think they're going to be like 2-14 for a couple of years. And the reason I say that is I think these players are so afraid of Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. They're afraid they're going to get cut. They're afraid, it's just like an iron fist that they rule that place with. But you can see that they just don't have the quality of players that they used to have, and they just can't seem to get it done, in big situations.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. I mean, so we talked about the defense a little bit, but then you had a situation kind of like the Jaguars game where in Jacksonville, Gronkowski got knocked out with concussion. In this game, it was Cooks. I guess it was second quarter, first or second quarter, he gets knocked out with a concussion. And you have Brady, all he had left really was Amendola and Gronkowski in terms of receiving threat. So, you think go ahead.
He had that other guy. What's his name?
Hogan.
Yeah, Hogan. Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But I'll tell you what I think of that. I mean, you could see last night that after the game, of course, they asked Brady about retirement, and he said he expects to be back.
Sure.
But Gronkowski threw him a little curve by saying, "Hey, I'm going to reevaluate my situation." He made people think that he was actually going to consider possibly retiring.
Right.
Okay. Now, what I'm about to say is, Gronkowski is the glue that makes that team go. All right, not Brady. All right, and that sounds like blasphemy from someone. But you look at when did Gronkowski come to the league? Around 2011, right?
Yeah,
somewhere in that area. Okay,
yeah.
How many Super Bowls did they go to from 2004 to 2011? Okay, they went to one. All right,
Right.
before Gronkowski.
Right.
All right, and they had Randy Moss that year. All right. Well, since Gronkowski's been there, they've been able to go to quite a few. They've been to go to three. Okay, what I'm trying to say is, in the first half, they couldn't get the ball to Gronkowski. All right, and the offense of the Patriots was stymied. All right, but then in the second half, they were able to get him the football, and all of a sudden, they scored on every possession they had. He is a mismatch. He's a coverage nightmare. No one can cover the guy. Okay, I mean, you can't cover him with a linebacker. He's too fast for them. You can't cover him with a corner. He's too big for them. You got to cover him with a safety, and there's not many safeties good enough to cover him. All right. So he's a mismatch. Now, what the Eagles did, which I thought was pretty fascinating, is everybody thought they were going to put Malcolm Jenkins one-on-one with Gronkowski. All right. But they didn't do that. They put Malcolm Jenkins on James White. All right. Mm-hmm. And they played kind of a zone underneath. And they took away that seam route that Brady likes to throw to Gronkowski in the first half, and pretty much they had the Patriots stymied. Now in the second half, the Patriots made some adjustments, and they were able to get Gronkowski the ball. But I say all that to say that you take Gronkowski off of that team. Let's say he does retire next year. I think you're going to see the Patriots go down significantly offensively because they have no other weapons to throw the ball to.
Yeah. I agree with that point, but again, I don't think he's going to retire personally.
No, he's not. No.
It's kind of like a Roethlisberger comment he made last year. Like it's kind of in the moment. Like, yeah, I don't know, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, take Gronkowski off that offense. I mean, you saw last year's Super Bowl. He wasn't there, and they were down 28-3, and a lot of things involved in that comeback. But the Falcons were taking care of business there because they didn't have to worry about Gronkowski in part, but. So yeah, that the Gronkowski factor can't be overlooked. And then on the other hand, for the Eagles, you have Foles, right? So it was only, I guess, late December, early January, where he played against Oakland and Dallas and looked not great at all.
Horrible.
And then I think Dallas beat him 6-0 in Week 17, if I remember.
I think so.
Yeah. So and then fast forward here to early February, and the guy's a Super Bowl MVP. So, how do you explain Foles in the last month there? And B, what did the Eagles do now with Foles?
Well, I think the way you explain it, and this is something that I read today or heard today, which I think is fascinating, and I think you got to give Doug Peterson total credit because this is what coaching is all about. After the regular season was over, during the bye week, what the Eagles did was they went back and looked at all the film from 2014. Or when Foles had that great year with Chip Kelly, right? And they looked at all of that, and they looked at all the plays that he was comfortable running, all the things he did well, and they basically incorporated all that into their offense. So basically they changed who they were to make it comfortable for Nick Foles. And then he took off. I mean, he struggled a little bit against the Falcons in the first playoff game, and then he torched the Vikings and he torched the Patriots. So you got to give the Eagles coaches credit. That's what they did. They went back and looked at, okay, why was this guy so successful when he was here in 13 and 14? And let's incorporate some of those things into our offense to make him more successful. Now, to answer the second question, what are they going to do with Nick Foles? There's two schools of thought there. The first school of thought is, hey, the guy's trade value is never going to be higher than it is right now.
Yes.
All right. He's the Super Bowl MVP. You could probably get some team to give you a king's ransom for Nick Foles.
Right.
The flip side of that, though, is we really don't know if Carson Wentz is going to be ready to start game one. Right? I mean, it's very possible that he might not be ready till week 2 or week 3. All right. So what do you do? I personally, if it was me, I mean, if the Cleveland Browns, who are notorious for this, come to me and say, we'll give you 2 number 1 picks for Nick Foles, I'd do it. Okay.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think I keep him. I start him next year, let him play 2 or 3 games until Wentz is ready, and then you put Wentz back in and you go from there. And then after that, his contract is done anyway, and you can either trade him or obviously you trade him. But I mean, if he goes free agent, he goes free agent.
Yeah.
But I think that's what you have to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and you basically said this: the play is to keep him for now. If Wentz isn't ready to start the season 100%, you can play Foles a couple games. If Wentz is, you can still trade Foles at the trade deadline, and
exactly,
his value isn't going to drop between now and then, really, because this is the last meaningful game he will probably played. So, I think you hold on to him for now. The question is, if somebody like the Browns or one of these teams offers you first rounders for Wentz. You don't do that, do you?
No, no,
Okay,
you don't do
okay,
that. I mean
okay.
yeah. I mean, yeah, that would be tempting, but Wentz is 25
I
years
know,
old.
I
Okay,
know.
I mean, if the guy wouldn't have got hurt, he probably would have been the MVP. All
Yeah,
right,
I mean, yeah, and that's a good point you brought up too, because I mean, people are quick to forget about, and I'm kind of included that under Wentz, the Eagles were 12-1. What was it, 12-1?
12-1.
And
That's exactly right.
he put them in position to get the one seed and afforded them the luxury of faltering week 16 and 17 with Foles. So they
But
certainly owe a lot to Wentz this season.
But you're exactly right. But here's another thing you got to consider, which nobody knows the answer to. Okay, is that, and I know because I had an ACL injury and an ACL reconstruction. Once your knee goes, it's never going to be the same.
Yeah,
Okay, and then the second question is Wentz going to be injury prone? Because as he starts to get to be 27, 28,
yeah,
29, he's not going to be able to run like he does now. And he may not be able to run anymore like he used to do.
right,
So that's another factor is, is he going to be an injury prone quarterback? We don't know. All
right,
right. But still, it would be stupid to try to trade Wentz and keep Nick Foles because, I think Nick Foles is a little bit like Case Keenum. I mean, I think the clock may strike 12 at any time,
yeah,
and he could turn back into, the old Nick Foles,
right, right. Yeah, I
Um,
mean, yeah, I think that, um, yeah, you definitely hold on to him for now and kind of let things play out.
what did you think about the Eagles play calling? I mean, I want to get your take on that.
Well, I mean, you heard the you heard the term, which it's bothering me now. I hear it so much is the RPO, the run pass option,
Right.
thrown out in the game, and I mean, you hear that all the time. But that seems to be what Wentz is doing well, and then they trust him to air it out a bit. I like their running back combo, the Jai and Blunt. I mean, um, those guys had pretty good games last night, and Blunt's somebody that the Patriots thought they could do without. After winning the Super Bowl last year with him, and he helped the Eagles come back and beat him this year. So, um, I liked how they, like you said, they obviously did figure out what Wentz could do or what Foles could do well, and they just trusted him. So I mean, I liked them letting him air it out a little bit, and take advantage of that secondary.
Well, I think what the Eagles did so well in this game is they realized, which we've said for a long time, is you're not going to beat the Patriots with field goals. Okay,
Right,
I mean
right,
I think I texted you I think I texted you during that when they scored that touchdown right before the half. Okay, and it was fourth down on the 6 yard line or whatever it was, 3 yard line, and they called a timeout and they ran that flea flicker play
yeah,
and threw it to Foles. And before that, I said, you got to go for it here because to quote Wally Rigendorf from Necessary Roughness, 3 points aren't going to do it this time,
right,
man.
right,
I mean, you're not going to beat the Patriots by kicking field goals. All right,
right,
you've got to put pressure on Tom Brady to score every time he goes down the field, and I thought that showed tremendous amount of guts on the Eagles' part to try to go for it in that situation because they knew. You remember right before that, the Patriots had gone down and scored to pull the game within 3. All right. And then the Eagles, here's what I thought was really interesting. When the Patriots went down and scored to make it 20, or they made it 15-12,
yeah,
the Eagles could have very easily run the clock out thinking, okay, we got the lead. Let's take it to halftime.
right,
But they threw it down the field. They went for it on fourth down and scored because they realized you've got to put pressure on the Patriots. You cannot kick field goals. And that
right,
helped them tremendously. And then the other call that I thought was magnificent was with about 5 minutes left in the game when they had that 4th and 1 there at I want to say it was about the 50-yard line, and they went for it and got the first down.
yeah.
Again, you cannot kick the ball back to the Patriots there down by 1 with 5 minutes left because you'll never see it again.
Right, right, and that when they did go for two, that 2 point call I thought was excellent.
It was an excellent call.
The kind of just the I don't think the Patriots saw it coming. I don't think anybody did, but not just the fact that they had a great play call, but a lot of coaches you'd figure that's a little quote unquote too early to go for two in a game, especially a big game like that in the Super Bowl. So that was good, and yeah, just the kind of the fearlessness of Doug Peterson there in the play calling. To quote Dan Fouch in the Water Boy, last game of the year, can't hold anything back now. So he definitely took that to heart. I'll agree with that.
Yeah, I think the Eagles had a tremendous game plan. Their defense, the thing that shocked me a little bit about the Eagles, and I said when we had our little Super Bowl preview, I thought the Eagles were basically the Jaguars in different colored uniforms,
Yeah.
but they could not they could not get to Tom Brady. I mean, the
Right.
Jaguars got to him quite a bit.
They did.
But the Eagles could not get to him, and that shocked me a little bit that they were not able. They pressured him and they hit him a few times,
Yeah.
but they really couldn't sack him until that very last one there when they got the fumble, and their secondary really did not. I mean, there were receivers running wide open in that
Yeah.
secondary,
Yeah.
which I thought was really interesting. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, you just don't see that with a defense that's supposed to be so good, and that really shocked me a little bit. But their offensive game plan was awesome. They didn't sit on the lead. They didn't they ran the ball when they wanted to run the ball. Foles, I mean, and they protected Foles. I mean, their offensive line played an outstanding game.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Not only for blocking for the running game, but I don't think they ever touched Nick Foles. I don't remember him ever getting hit.
Yeah. They definitely didn't have a sack, and I agree. They rarely hit him.
So you know, I mean, it was pretty fascinating game plan from the Eagles standpoint. So you know, I mean,
did you think on the drive where they had the strip fumble? Did you think the Patriots were going to score? Because I certainly did.
yes, I definitely did. I mean, there was 2 minutes and 20 seconds left
right,
in the game.
Right.
They had a timeout and the 2-minute warning.
Yeah.
There's no question they were going to score on that drive.
It's almost like they needed that turnover. If anything was going to happen, it's either going to be Patriots score, or they get a big play like that, because I don't think they were going to stop them on downs or anything like that.
No, that's exactly right. Here's another thing that we need to discuss. You know, I mean, what'd you think about the catch rule? I mean, that was pretty fascinating.
They're obviously going to have to look at this rule in the offseason. I think they are. I mean, from all things you're hearing, but the first one, actually it was the second play, but the first one that I want to recall here is the one with Ertz, where he effectively became a runner,
right?
And once he crossed the plane with the ball, it was a touchdown, which I thought was pretty self-explanatory. Like they obviously made the right call, but it's just another one there that seemed to be a little iffy. And I mean, I think the announcers, or Michaels and Collinsworth, didn't want to make it as obvious as it really was, where he was clearly a runner there.
Yes, he was.
But the other touchdown to who caught it? What was his name? The receiver.
It was a running back. I can't remember his name.
His name escapes me now. But
number 30.
Right in the back of the end zone there. I mean, I thought they could have conceivably overturned that. I mean, I didn't really know what the right call there was. Did you?
Well, no. Well, here's the fascinating thing about that play. Okay, if I'm the Buffalo Bills owner, all right, I'm marching myself up to Roger Goodell's office and complaining. That play happened just as it was in their second meeting against the Patriots. Their receiver caught the ball in the corner of the end zone. He bobbled it. His foot came down out of bounds. I mean, exact same play. All right, the guy caught the ball, had both feet in bounds, bobbled it for a minute, and when he recontrolled it, his other foot was out of bounds. They called, okay, and they called that no catch.
Yes.
And this one they called a catch, okay? Right. So, and both situations were the same. They were both ruled touchdowns on the field. The Bills one back in the regular season was overturned. This one was upheld. Now, my point being is that here's my problem with the NFL. Okay, we've talked about this many, many times. We've talked about it in baseball. Okay, we've talked about how when you get to the playoffs, well, they're not going to call that a ball. You know, he earned that strike. You know, I mean, yeah. I don't care if it's the playoffs. I don't care if it's the preseason. I don't care if it's week number 2. You got to be consistent. If the NFL catch rule is such that you're going to overturn that play, all right, then how come all of a sudden in the Super Bowl you want to change things, all right? And I think Goodell, you know, he made his State of the League address on Wednesday. He mentioned how they've got to look into that rule. They've got to change it. And Al Riveron, the director of officials who's reviewing these things, I think said, hey, we better start moving the other way. And they did in the Super Bowl. Which, you know, I mean, is ridiculous to me, because how could you all of a sudden change something that you've been doing all year long?
Well, that's an excellent point. But then also, I mean, I always thought that the way it was supposed to go is whatever they call in the field is what they call. And then the replay, there has to be overwhelming evidence the other way, right? But it seems like this year and maybe the past couple of years, it's been like, okay, we're going to review the play from scratch and just see what happened. Like,
right.
They need to make that clear, first of all, too, what they're actually trying to do. Because, you know, like I was always under the impression that, okay, they called it a catch. If it's obviously clearly not a catch, okay, then it's not. But if it's too hard to tell, you just go with the call on the field. Like, I mean, that's what they should be doing, I think.
Well, and that's exactly right. And that begs the other question: is that replay was not meant to look for minute errors.
Right.
Replay was meant to overturn obvious mistakes.
Right.
Okay. In other words, if a guy is running down the sideline and he scores a touchdown, but he stepped out of bounds, yes.
Yeah.
If a guy, if a ball actually hit the ground, like in the NFC Championship when the Vikings were down 34-7 and they scored that supposed touchdown, the ball hit the ground. Okay. Yeah. So that's what replay's for. Replay's not to look at 3,000 different angles to decide if a ball moved a quarter of an inch or not. That's not what replay was meant to be.
Right.
Okay. And that's what they need to take out of it. Just like you just said. You said it perfectly. The call on the field is the call on the field. Okay. Look at it once. If it's not completely obvious that something happened, bang, it's over. The call on the field stands.
Yeah.
Right. There shouldn't be this 2 and 3 minute delay for them to look at 5,000 different angles of it to try to figure out why they should overturn it. And that's really what it's become. But then also you got to change the actual nature of the call. I mean, a catch is a catch is a catch. If the ball doesn't hit the ground, I don't care if you bobbled it 5 times.
Yeah.
Okay. It's still a catch to me.
Right.
All right.
What's the term they use? Surviving the ground.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Surviving.
Yeah.
I don't get that at all. I mean,
Yeah.
To me, nobody's been able to explain to me, okay, logically, if I catch a football, if I'm running down the sidelines or anywhere, and I catch a football, okay, and I get hit, and I go to the ground, but I bobble the ball, as long as that ball does not touch the ground, that's a catch.
Yes.
Okay. Why do I have to survive the ground? I mean, I don't understand that. All right. Now, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, it's the same thing as a fumble. If I run down the field running the football and I get hit and I hit the ground and I fumble it, that's not a fumble, is it?
Right.
Okay.
It's not, yeah.
So why is it incomplete? And that's where I think they've got to address it. They've got to change the actual rule and say, look, as long as the ball does not hit the ground, it's a catch. If you control the football to where it doesn't if you use the ground to control the football, that's a different story. Okay.
Right.
And that's where I think they've gotten away from, all this, because this all started back in 2000, when the Rams won their first Super Bowl, 99. And in the divisional round when they played the Buccaneers, the Buccaneers were driving for a go-ahead score. One of their players caught a ball and he pinned it against the ground. They called it incomplete.
Right.
And that's where all this started. Now they got to go back and say, doesn't matter. If you use the ground to pin the ball to your body, it's not a catch. In every other situation, it's got to be a catch. All right?
Yeah. I think, and you made the clearest case for it, is it shouldn't be any different than if you're a ball carrier running it. So
that's exactly right.
Absolutely. I mean, so lastly here, the kicking game last night. I mean, you had some missed extra points, but the Eagles kicker came up big with that final field goal there, because if he misses that, they're only up 5, and the Patriots have the ball on their own roughly 40 or so.
That's right.
So that was a big kick to put them up 8 there, and really, really put the Patriots in a bind that they probably couldn't come out of.
Right. And the kicking game, and here's another thing, you look at, and I'm not trying to make excuses for kickers or holders or snappers, but they use brand new footballs in the Super Bowl. Okay, they use footballs that the teams have not used all year long, and I don't know if you noticed or not, but when they showed those footballs, they looked awful shiny to me.
Yeah.
Okay. So these footballs are not rubbed down. They don't have a chance to rub these things down like they normally do. It's kind of like a baseball, right? They rub it down with that rubbing dirt.
Right.
So these balls are hard to hold, to snap. Even when you kick them, they may come off your foot a certain way. So that's not an excuse, but that's part of it.
No, that's an excellent point that I never even thought of, because you saw the one with the Patriots, the snap or the snap/hold catch was bobbled.
Right.
That could have definitely had something to do with the feeling of the ball, right? Because I mean, those kickers kickers and holders, that whole group, are probably really precise about what ball they're using. And like you said, in the Super Bowl, where you have all the balls for, I guess, memorabilia purposes or whatever, those shiny balls with the logo on them, it's certainly different. That's for sure. Yeah, I never thought of that.
Well, and then another factor to add into it too is, since they moved the extra point back to the 33, you're actually kicking it from the 23-yard line, I believe now, or whatever.
Right.
The Super Bowl 52 logo is right at that spot on both sides of the field. Okay, so now the kicker's got to plant his foot inside that logo.
Yeah.
Well, these logos are sprayed onto this field. You know,
Right.
you don't have those logos on the field in the regular season. So that's got a little bit to do with it as well, to affect the King game. But regardless of that, I mean, you should never miss an extra point. I mean, period. I mean, that's kind of a given thing, you know. So
Yeah. Speaking of that, I saw something on, I guess it was Twitter, and I didn't look too deep into the story, that apparently after they'd pinned all these new logos on, like you were talking about yesterday, I guess sometime in the morning, they realized they forgot to put hash marks on the logos.
yeah.
Like they had to come do that like at the last second. Like they forgot the hash marks in midfield or somewhere. So that's, it's all kinds of stuff that happened with the Super Bowl.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you're basically playing the game on an artificial. I mean, obviously an artificial field, but it's a propped up field. You
Yeah.
got all this crazy stuff
Yeah.
on it, and you got these footballs that you've never played with before. I mean, just play a football game. You know, I mean, why do we have to do all this crazy stuff? You know?
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's that's how it is. Though they're never gonna change that.
So let's talk about. I mean, how does this affect next season? What does it look like for next season? What do you think?
Well, I mean, let's start with the Eagles. I mean, I think the Eagles are here to stay for a little while, right? I mean,
They are.
Assuming Wentz comes back healthy. You got to favor them in that division. I think they came out with the odds for Super Bowl champion next year, and the Eagles are. I think they were second or first. I forgot now, but
yeah, the Patriots are still first,
right? So I think, I think the Eagles are going to be favored to win that division. I think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. And then I think that, assuming Brady and Belichick are still there week 1 next year, I mean, they still play in the AFC East, and
right.
they're still going to be around in the playoffs. So I think that you haven't heard the last of either of these two teams, assuming nothing major changes. So I mean, how do you see it going forward?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the Patriots, assuming everybody comes back on the Patriots, Brady, Gronkowski, Belichick, the Patriots are going to be the Patriots. They're still going to go 13-3 or whatever. I think the Jaguars are going to be a force to be reckoned with next year. I think the Steelers, the Steelers got a lot of problems. I mean, I think I'm not so sure the Steelers are going to be the team that everybody thinks they're going to be next year. We don't know what kind of shape Roethlisberger is going to be in. We don't even know if he's coming back. We don't know if they're going to re-sign Le'Veon Bell. We just don't know what's going to happen with that football team, and they've got some major problems on the defensive side of the football.
Yeah, I mean, well, look, every year there's a handful of new playoff teams, right? I mean,
correct.
This year, I mean, there's always pretty good amount of turnover. So I think you got to look at teams. I mean, the Giants. Look, I mean, you can't really go off their record this year and say, oh, they're a bad team. Like we all know what happened with them, injuries, just crazy circumstances all year. So getting Beckham back, having a new head coach. Maybe having Manning back and Trent as the starter.
Right.
I mean, they're conceivably a 10 win team next year. All right, they could be back in the playoffs. I think
they could be back.
I think Oakland could be back in the playoffs with Gruden. I mean, they were in the playoffs the year before this year. I mean, I don't think they're not a bad team. Maybe he can get them back in.
Right.
You got to look at there's some playoff spots that are up for grabs that some teams we may not see right now. So we got to try to find those teams and see, because there's obviously going to be some kind of shakeup here and there.
Well, let's look at it. Let's look at this. Let's look at the teams that made the playoffs this year and go down that list. All right, we've already talked about the Patriots. We figured they're going to be back. Right. I think the Jaguars are definitely going to be back in a big way. The Steelers, I'm not so sure about the Steelers.
Yeah, I can see the Ravens winning that division. Yeah.
That's exactly right. I think the Chiefs are going to go down. They traded Alex Smith. They got a rookie quarterback, or it'll be a second-year quarterback. I don't see the Chiefs contending for that division this year, so I think they're out. I think the Titans could go either way. I mean, we just don't know. They made the playoffs. The Bills, if the Bills sign Kirk Cousins or the Bills, get a real quarterback in there, who knows? They could be back in the playoffs again as well. So I think on the AFC side, that's how I would see it from the teams that were there.
And you got to look at, I mean, assuming Luck comes back healthy, the Colts are going to be better than they were this past year.
Right.
We talked about the Ravens who weren't in it. And the Texans, if Deshaun Watson can show that he's the guy people think he is before he got hurt, they're going to be somewhat, competitive next year. So yeah, it's going to be interesting in the AFC.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. And then if you look at the NFC, I think obviously the Eagles are going to be right up there again. They're the defending champions. I think The Vikings, that's a crapshoot. I mean, they lost
Yeah.
their offensive coordinator. He's now the head coach of the Giants.
Yeah.
We're not sure what they're going to do at quarterback. Now they're going to get their running back. Dalvin Cook's going to come back, the guy that was so good. I think the Vikings are going to be a contender again. I think the Falcons are going to be back. I mean, I think they've got all the pieces they need. It's just a matter of, starting strong and finishing strong. I think the Saints are going to be back. If Drew Brees comes back, I think they're going to be right back in it again. They've got a lot of talent, the Saints. I think Carolina is going to be back in the mix. They're still a pretty good football team. And I think the Rams, I think they went through that 1 year of learning process of being a young team and getting bumped out of the playoffs, but they're going to be back. So I think the NFC has more of a possibility for the teams that were in this year to be contenders again next year. Now, the flip side of that is you got to look at the Packers. I mean, if Aaron Rodgers comes back healthy, they've got a new general manager, they got a new offensive coordinator. So I think they may make the run that everybody thinks they could probably make with that football team.
Well, then you got the 49ers who
the 49ers.
They won. What did they finish? They won 5 or 6 straight with Garoppolo. So
they did. That's exactly right.
I mean, they could conceivably give the Rams a fight for that division.
They sure could. And I think you're going to see the Cardinals go down. I think you're going to see the Seahawks go down a little bit. So I think that's how I see that happening. I think Detroit. They're going to have a new head coach. The guy that was the Patriots defense coordinator. Who knows what's going to happen there?
Right.
And in the NFC East, you mentioned the Giants. I think the Giants have a real possibility. It all depends on what they do with that offensive line. If they can repair that offensive line quickly through free agency and a couple of draft picks, and they can get a decent running back, I agree. I think they can be an 8, 9, 10 win team and make a run at it. I think the Cowboys, if they can get their defense fixed, I think they've got a chance to be in the mix. So I think, having said all that, I think the NFC is a much more competitive conference than the AFC is.
Yeah, I think not only competitive, but I think that the Eagles certainly aren't a lock to come out of there again next year.
No.
I think that's more of an upper grab conference. The AFC could be as well, but you have the Patriots kind of looming over there. And we don't know what's going to happen with them. I mean, anything could happen, but I think that all these things you just talked about lead for the NFC to be much more interesting conference when you look at next year.
And here's the thing that you can't really quantify. And you've played sports. I've played it. We understand this. Is that this is one reason. As much as I hate the Patriots, this is one reason why I respect what they've done. When you're trying to get to the top, when you're hungry, it's a lot different than when you've already gotten there.
Yeah.
Okay. In other words, we don't know how the Eagles are going to react next year.
Yeah.
I mean, they're the champions. They may come out flat. They may come out resting on their laurels. We don't know how 53 guys are going to react when they come out next year. The Patriots, though, have always been able to overcome that. So that's why I'm not so ready to crown the Eagles again, because we just don't know how they're going to react now that they've achieved what they've been trying to achieve for so long.
Right.
So that could throw a little bit of a wrench in the Eagles' chances for repeating. And injuries. You never know how injuries are going to play out.
Right.
I mean, this year it was Carson Wentz. I mean, what if next year it's one of their offensive linemen or two of their offensive linemen?
Right.
We just don't know how that's going to play out. But
let me pose this question to you. So the Eagles won the Super Bowl. They have never won a Super Bowl before, right, until now.
Right.
Who is your prediction? And it may not be next year. It may not be the year after that. Who is the next team that has never won a Super Bowl to win a Super Bowl, in your opinion? Who will be the next team?
That's an excellent question. I'm going to say the Jaguars.
Okay, all right.
I'm going to say the Jaguars.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you look at they were one or two bad calls and a couple of poor play calls away from being in the Super Bowl this year. Right?
They should have been.
And I think they would have given the Eagles a pretty good run for their money with that defense.
They would. Their defense would have been a better matchup than the Patriots' defense for their offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's got to be the Jaguars because how many teams have never won the Super Bowl, right? So, the Browns are not going to win the Super Bowl.
My vote is going to be for the Chargers.
Well, that's excellent. I never thought about that. The one thing that worries me about the Chargers is how much juice does what's his name, the quarterback,
Rivers.
Yeah, I mean Rivers. How much juice does he have? I mean, he played great last year, but he's the same age as Eli Manning and Roethlisberger, and I just don't know. I just don't know with the Chargers.
Because I think, I saw a quote towards the end of the season. Somebody asked him about, Brady playing until he's 45, or how claiming he's going to play until he's 45, and asked him how long he was going to play, and he said something like, he's definitely not 45 because I'll be coaching high school football by then. So I think he's got maybe 3 or so years left, and he's probably going to be ready to retire.
Yeah, but I'm sure his wife is telling him, you've got 2 or 3 good years left.
Yeah, another classic Any Given Sunday reference. But
by the way, he's got like 9 kids. I mean,
yeah, right. I know. Yeah,
I mean, that's amazing. I don't. I mean, God bless his wife. I mean, because he's never home, obviously, but
right.
And he still lives in San Diego. Remember you talked about that one time?
He does. Yeah, he commutes.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Absolutely.
That's. Hey, did you hear last night, though, changing the subject a little bit, during the game, he corrected himself as quick as I could think, as I thought of it. But Al Michaels said that Matt Patricia was leaving the Patriots to become the next coach of the Pistons.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Yeah, I heard that. I was thinking, and Collinsworth goes, yeah, that would be some news, wouldn't it?
Yeah. He goes, Pistons. He goes, I'm sure he'll get season tickets to the Pistons if he wants it.
Well, then it was that, and then he also pointed out California Angels outfielder Mike Trout.
I caught that too, and he didn't correct that one. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So he was feeling it last night with his throwback references and his mispronunciations and stuff.
How about Collinsworth too? I mean, there was a lot of trending social media stuff today about Collinsworth was a fan of the Patriots. He showed his favoritism for the Patriots.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm quick to call anyone out that's favoring the Patriots, but he didn't come across like that to me in an obvious way.
No, not me neither.
I mean, then again, those two are my favorite announcing crew personally, so I think they had a good call, as you would call them, the game. But next year we'll get to hear Romo call the game, I think. So that should be interesting, right?
That ought to be interesting. He'll be like, "Oh, gee, look at that play! That's a fantastic play! I just can't help myself."
Oh boy!
Can you imagine him when that play when Nick Foles caught that touchdown pass? Romo would have probably he would have probably had an asthmatic attack.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh boy! The only problem about next year is we got to listen to Jim Nance. I mean, that guy's. I mean, he's such an idiot. Here's another thing that bothers me too. As long as we're talking about announcers and stuff, I mentioned to you one time where I don't watch ESPN anymore. Okay, I don't like ESPN at all. All right, so I've been watching this Boomer and Geo show on CBS Sports, their morning talk show with Boomer Esiason and this Geo, whatever his name is. Actually, that's not his first name, but that doesn't matter. Okay, and anyway, they take calls. Okay, and obviously they're on TV, so you can see their reaction while the caller's talking on the phone.
Yeah.
And the one guy called in, and I forget what he was talking about, but this guy, they were making all kinds of faces like this guy really didn't know what he's talking about. And I'm thinking to myself, here's my takeaway from that is, you and I are doing this podcast, okay? We have as much knowledge of sports as these bozos that are on TV, okay? I mean, we played sports. I mean, we may not have played in the Major League Baseball or the NFL. Okay, so I'll give Esiason a little bit of an edge there. But this guy that was with Esiason, I've played more football than he ever dreamed of playing. Okay, who is he to judge some caller as to whether that guy knows what he's talking about or not? I mean, and that really is what bothers me about all these talking heads. I mean, they think they know everything about sports. They don't know anything about sports. Okay, and you can give your opinion. That's fine, but a lot of fans are as knowledgeable, if not more knowledgeable, than these guys that are sitting up there, passing judgment on them. So, I just think it's gotten out of hand. I mean, I think if you don't like what the guy says when he calls it, don't take calls.
Right? Yeah, that's I mean, that's why I always liked Jim Rome's radio show because he doesn't always take calls, but his rule is if you call in, have a take and don't suck, or he'll run you. So,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, but anyway, it should be an interesting season next year. Now we can deal with we've got the combine coming up and then the draft and
So I mean, like you said, it's wrapped up. But looking ahead on the Press Box podcast here, like you said, we've got the NFL Combine. I'm sure we'll talk some of that. We've got, to be honest, we're probably not going to talk much March Madness, but that is happening.
No,
not a fan of college basketball. I do like the NBA, but not college basketball. But and we have the Masters coming up, of course.
Right.
We're getting a little bit of that with Tiger, chasing that.
And we got baseball coming up,
and of course baseball, absolutely. Pitchers and catchers report here, and I think any minute now. it seems like. But yeah, so that'll be good here, and we know we'll be talking all of that, and we'll have some more great guests as well.
Yes, we will. It'll be awesome.
Yeah. So again, thanks for joining us on this Super Bowl recap edition. And last thing I'll say, I think we can all agree that the Monday after the Super Bowl should be a holiday, right?
There's no question about it. The
Uh,
Monday after the Super Bowl should be a holiday for everybody, and a
combine
national holidays.
combine President's Day with this and put it right here, and you're good.
And let me add one other thing is my early prediction for obviously the Eagles now being the champs will open up on Thursday night. They'll be the Thursday night game in September, the first game. I think they're going to play the Vikings. I think they're going to pit them against the Vikings.
Okay. So I mean that's so they both finished first, right?
They
So
both finished first.
they will play each other. Okay.
They will play each other, and I think
This depends on if it's going to be at the Eagle Stadium.
yeah, well, I think they'll determine that. I don't know how they determine that.
Right.
I know when you're playing the other conference, it's a
Right.
rotational thing. But I think whoever finished with the best record, or if you won the game that you played the season before, you get the home game. So very possible that could be the Thursday night matchup to open the season.
That's a good call. I wouldn't bet against that.
Yeah.
But anyway, we enjoyed it here, talking a little Super Bowl and things to come. So for Ralph, this is Joseph signing off for this episode of the Press Box Podcast. Stay tuned for more coming up next week.